To find the distance between a pair of points on a coordinate plane, you first need to create a right triangle. Because you need to calculate the vertical and the horizontal distance between the points, and then use Pythagorean theorem, which is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. That should look familiar to everybody. This is Pythagorean theorem, where the A and the B are the legs, or the perpendicular parts of the triangle, and C is the hypotenuse. It's very, very important that C, which is the hypotenuse, that is the longest side, or the side opposite from the 90-degree angle. A and B are the legs. They can be switched around. But let's start by making a right triangle between these 2 points, F and G. I need a horizontal leg, so that can follow this grid line right here, and a vertical leg right here. And that creates a right triangle. Now, calculate the distances along those legs. The horizontal distance, which is this one right here, and again, count the spaces, not the grid lines. 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces. So that horizontal distance is 4. And then the vertical distance is 1, 2, 3. So a vertical distance of 3. Now, those are the 2 sides, or the legs, of our right triangle. Now we need to calculate the length of our hypotenuse, which is actually our segment. So all I have to do is put the 4 and the 3 into Pythagorean theorem and solve for C. So up here, 4 squared plus 3 squared equals C squared. Now I have to do my squaring before I add these numbers together. You have to follow order of operations. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Parentheses, exponents, multiplying and dividing, adding and subtracting. So first I have to do my exponents. 4 squared, that is not 4 times 2, it's 4 times 4, which is 16. 3 squared is 3 times 3, which is 9, equals C squared. Now I can add the 16 and the 9 together, and I get 25, equals C squared. Now to solve for C, I need to get rid of that exponent of 2. Again, an exponent is not a multiplication problem. The opposite of squaring something, in order to get rid of this second power, I'm going to have to take the square root of both sides. You're going to be doing this a lot in geometry, using Pythagorean theorem and taking square roots, so get used to that. The square root cancels out the square, and that leaves me with just C. And then the square root of 25, that means what number times itself will give me 25? Well, 5 times 5 is 25, so the square root of 25 is 5, and that means our length is 5. Now, let's take a look at doing this without a graph. This formula here for distance between 2 points is just the Pythagorean theorem. These numbers below the letters just indicate which point we got that number from. So over here, I want to find R and S. These are the same 2 coordinates from the one we just found in the graph. Each coordinate pair is set up with an X and a Y. The X sub 1 and Y sub 1, that just means the X and the Y from our first point. And the X sub 2 and Y sub 2 mean the X and the Y from our second point. So all we have to do is take these numbers and substitute them into the right places in our equation, or in our formula, and solve. I'll go ahead and do that. So here we go. The square root, I'm going to keep everything there and just replace the letters. x sub 2 is 3. X sub 1 is negative 2. Y sub 2 is 15. And y sub 1 is 3. Now, be careful when you're subtracting with negative numbers. I always told my students when I was teaching 7th grade to never subtract when you have negative numbers. Change subtraction into addition, and then change the sign of the next number. Do not change the sign of the first number, the number before the subtraction sign. Change the sign of the number after the subtraction sign. So here what I essentially have is just 3 plus a positive 2, or 3 plus 2, which is 5. So I end up with 5 squared plus, and then 15 minus 3 is 12. Okay, now again, exponents. 5 squared plus 12 squared. 5 squared is 25. 12 squared is 144. It would help if you know your multiplication tables at this point, so you wouldn't have to grab a calculator. 144 plus 25 is 169. Now at this point you may need to grab a calculator, but it would be helpful if you know what's called the perfect squares. Those are numbers, when you take the square root you get a whole number answer. And this 169 is actually a perfect square. 169 is 13 times 13. So the square root of 169 is 13. And that's our answer.